Tonight on the Online Wine Tasting Club, we drink a lot of Tempranillo. But wait, this one is pink. And what's it got to do with the coral reef? Alex talks, as usual, about pruning. But we don't talk about wine number 4. It's time for a masterclass on the Ribera del Duero region with the Adventurer series. Good evening, welcome to the Online Wine Tasting Club, and it is lovely to see you all. We are going on a trip to Spain, which apparently half of the world has done this week anyway.
The roof of the O2's there about
The roof
now,
of the
I think,
O2
is what I heard.
Spain or possibly somewhere a little bit south of it. Yes, absolutely. It's great to see you. And we're doing this in slightly the opposite order to normal because we kind of had to miss our Spanish tasting because someone got the plague.
Well, it is what it is. So hey, I'm back.
He's back.
I'm back.
He's back.
I'm
Jamie
back
is back.
and
So
ready to go. And
we're
luckily,
delighted.
I didn't lose my sense of smell. I might have lost my sense of taste because I'm still sat next to you in that shirt.
Right.
But outside of that, it's all good. So we are doing Ribera del Duero. Absolutely fantastic region in Spain. One of my favorite places to go. But I'm going to put it out there first because we've got some top quality wine badgers out there who dive in and may well make some notes that you may well see that the first 2 wines aren't exactly technically from Ribera del Duero. So let's get wine 1 in the glass so we can start having a little sip. But I'll just explain my.
It's like that lawyer who beat up a fox with a baseball bat while wearing a kimono. And he lost a court case massively this week. And he says, in a strictly technical sense, I lost. But in otherwise, I was right. It's like, so strictly technical sense, it's not Ribera del Duero. But otherwise, other than coming from Ribera del Duero, it is.
Absolutely. So what we're going to have with the first couple of wines, we've got this rosé that comes from Valladolid, which is a big town just right next to Ribera del Duero, makes fantastic rosé. And then the
slap bang between Ribera and Rioja, so cool place.
And then we've got our second wine, which is our Albio. And Albio it's been grown in Ribera del Duero for a while now, but it's never been allowed as a registered under the DO to be labelled Ribera del Duero as the grape varietal. And that changed in 2019, so very recently in the world. But unfortunately, trying to get hold of enough Albio Mayor to be able to do this tasting was a little bit tricky. So we've got an Albio from a little bit about 2 hours south of Ribera, but I thought it was hugely important to get that grape out in front of everybody. It's cool, it's unique, it's interesting. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk through these first 2 wines that are Ribera-esque and delicious wines. We've then got our little video that will give you the intro to Ribera del Duero. We're then going to dive into the red, and then Alex has talked about cutting sticks or something that we'll go on to later. But anyway, so welcome everybody, and it's probably time to start talking about the wine. As always, Caroline's over there in the chat producing, so any questions you have, get in, ask the questions, go from there. We're doing, a promotion between us and Tring Winery for Ribera del Duero week. So if you fancy taking a picture of what you're drinking and use the hashtag Reach for Ribera del Duero, tag us in it, tag Tring Winery in it as well, and we'll pick out some of our favourite pictures, and we'll probably send you a gift card, won't we? We'll send a gift card?
I think we will.
We'll send a gift card. I like that idea. So anyway, rosé
wine, exactly what you expect when you talk about Ribera del Duero, but this one is 100% Tempranillo, which is the Ribera grape. It's also the Rioja grape, and I think let's talk about the elephant in the room. Ribera and Rioja. Rioja, just down the road. It's 2 hours away, absolutely 2 hours away, and they produce these 2 completely different styles of wine from primarily the same grape. Now, Rioja's got a few more grapes, and Jamie will name all of them probably if you poke him in the right way.
Tempranillo.
I don't think that's
exactly.
But yeah, there's more. But But over here in Ribera del Duero, Tempranillo is absolutely king, and there are some others. So we've got a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Tempranillo on, I think it's the Pruno, isn't it? Yeah,
I'm
something
not
like
going
that.
to talk about that.
For those who have no clue what is going on, there is a film out at the moment, courtesy of Disney. It's called Encanto, and it features a song called "We Don't Talk About Bruno." And
And we made that massive, massive
yeah,
leap that
huge,
no one else would have got
giant jump
from
into
that.
Pruno. Yeah,
But anyway, we'll get deep into Ribera
yeah,
when we actually get into Ribera. So what I like about this is rosé comes in all different styles. We go from this beautiful, beautiful dry style from the south of France. We go to this rich, lush, sweet style from
hmm
California. This for me, it sits nicely in the middle. It's not absolutely bone dry. It's got some nice fruit to it. It's just really good drinking.
yeah.
Not quite for the weather we've had the last couple of days, um, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. But a great wine, and it's always got to be great wine to get it on there. But what I like about these guys is, if you follow the wine news and wine Twitter and that kind of stuff, there's something beginning of this year, and it's always been an issue, but it seemed to really come to the forefront about these massive, heavy glass bottles. And I'm sure we've all had that bottle of wine that we pick up and we drink, and then we pick up the empty bottle, and it still feels like
Yeah,
it's full,
it's
and
ridiculous.
it is not good for the environment. The carbon footprint is massive. It might look good, it might feel good, but it doesn't actually make any difference to the wine.
The challenge is everyone thinks glass is amazingly environmentally friendly because isn't it infinitely recyclable? And that's what we all think, that we stick a bottle in the recycling bin and it becomes another glass bottle. And that's unfortunately not quite true. If you're lucky, they will pick it out and put it with the clear glass bottles, and then you'll get another clear glass bottle out of it. But that only happens in a tiny fraction of the cases. About half of it goes into landfill, half the glass that we do. Of the other half, most of it goes for sandblasting. So if you're trying to get rid of graffiti, you crush up the glass and you blast off the graffiti, or you make roads out of it. Very, very little is pure enough to go into making more glass bottles. So glass, it seems great, it seems ethical. So the best thing you can do from an environmental perspective is to use as little as possible as you can. And that's what these guys are doing. So fair play to them.
Yeah, we've got glass bottles out there that are
Yeah.
kilo and a half at the top end.
So
This comes in, I think it's 412 grams. So doing a really, really
yeah,
good job with it, and it's got the nice story. So they're lightweight glass. It's called coral because they donate 10% of their profits to regenerating coral reefs, and it's just got this really kind of green emphasis about coral reefs and
yeah, it's
rainforests.
organic. It's
Um,
you know they're trying their best from the vineyard right through to the whole life cycle of this to do a good job. But the key question is what's it like in the glass? And if you talk about Tempranillo as a grape to make rosé wine, you don't want to get too much of that red color from the skins that the rosé, the red, the black grape gives you. And Tempranillo is a really thick-skinned, really deep-colored
this
grape.
generally,
So
when we look at what you get from a Tempranillo, wherever you are in Spain, they're going after this big, juicy, dark, tannic
yeah,
style. That's what that grape does. So to be able to pull it apart, you've got to have some very, very, very careful winemaking because you only want a little bit of colour, but you still want to get a lot of flavour. And it's hard, isn't it,
yeah,
as a
exactly,
winemaker
yeah, yeah.
yourself to get that balance from the thick and grape to get the right amount of colour, but still be able to get flavour and it
Yeah,
not be wishy washy.
a lot of the time when you're making a rosé wine, you're talking about how to get enough of the color out. If you're going to make a Pinot Noir rosé, well, Pinot Noir is a really light colored skin grape. It's a soft skin. You gently crush it, and the juice that comes out is clear. And that's how you make a Blanc de Noir champagne. It is a white wine that comes out of a black grape, Blanc de Noir. And so for something like this, it's the other way. You have to try not to get any colour out of it because that is what the tendency is. But what you do get in tons is the red fruit flavours. And I like that. I like a rosé that tastes of something really, really noticeable. And you've just got this massive hit of kind of of strawberry on the nose that you don't get from a Provençal, Sancerre or something like that. And that's a really cool wine. I like
It's
it.
it's a relatively for the colour. It's a
Mm,
relatively powerful rosé,
yeah.
and
It's
it's
not your Spanish Rosado typical, but
absolutely no.
flavour wise,
You look at a lot of these Spanish rosados; they're pink,
yeah,
they're
Barbie
pinky
pink,
purple
yeah.
kind of colour, not this light salmon-esque kind of colour, which is really really nice.
So that's the best of both worlds, isn't it? It looks cool in the glass, and it tastes of something.
When it starts to taste of something, that's when we can be more serious about rosé.
Yeah.
A lot of people go rosé; it's for 2 months a year. You can have it in July and August, and that's it. But when you get this richness balanced with this acidity, you can start talking about food pairings and have this with outside with your barbecue. And
yeah.
it's not just patio pounding rosé; that it's
Yeah.
cold, wet, pink. Get on with it, and it gets into that stage. You can start using it in
Proper,
culinary. Yeah.
exactly, culinary activity, and I think that's the fascinating thing when you look at some of these other ones. They are delicate and wonderful, and you have them as cold as possible, and there's no flavour that comes through when they're cold like that. So yeah, number one's lovely. Thank you,
I think
Julia.
it's a really just good, delicious wine for the beginning of the evening. And I don't want to spoil anybody's fun before we get there, but it's really good value for
Yeah.
what you're drinking. And bear in mind, you look at the price and tell you can drink this and save the coral reefs. So you can sit at home,
Happy
drink a
times.
bottle of this, and feel like you're doing well for the world.
Quite right. Very Moorish. Thank you, Ian. Good call. Good call. It's about as different a style of Tempranillo as you could possibly get from the really deep style that we're going to go down that. We're definitely going there tonight. We're going down the deep Tempranillo route.
I can see them.
He can see them. He can. And Tempranillo is a grape that carries a couple of different names in Spain, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it's always a fun thing that you can run around Spain and
Yeah.
talk Tempranillo synonyms. So we've got, Tempranillo is the grape, but if we get into Ribera, it can either be called Tinta Fina or Tinta do País will be the two things. We can go down to the south of Spain, and we can go over the Douro, which is far away, and you've got Tinta do Douro. You go to the south, and you get Centibel, and then you go over to the east, and you get Uva de Liebre. And I think that's my favourite synonym, because Uva de Liebre translates as eye of the hare, because Tempranillo, the grapes are really small and tight and black, and it looks like little rabbit's eyes.
Brilliant.
A little Uva de Liebre in your glass.
There you go. There's a fact
wrong with that.
There's a fact. That's
fun.
Excellent.
But anyway, should we get away from synonyms, away from rosé, and try something
let's have some whites, because whites
less
are
synonymy and more.
Yeah, so we talk a little bit about the white grapes, and you've mentioned that it's a recent addition to the Ribera portfolio, as it were. And
recent to being allowed to be called
Dio.
It's always been there as a house wine and table wine for people drinking, and it was just produced and done locally, as this is our local white wine.
Yeah.
But there's been such a jump behind it, and the quality of the wine is there that the regulation body has decided that this white wine can sit up there with Tempranillo as a Dio regulated.
And I think a big part of that is that, again, we do mention this, but DNA profiling was done on this grape, and they found out that it is one of the parents of Tempranillo. So we've got this white grape that has gone on to have a red wine bearing child after it. And so there we go. This is one of the parents, one of the ancestors of the Tempranillo, and it's producing this incredible colour of wine. I mean, I think you're obviously you've got it in your glass, but there's tints of green in that, but it's got a lot of colour in it. If you were doing your WSET, I would say that was quite intense colour, wouldn't you? Intense sort of.
Well, you're going
lemon
into these
with
kind of lemony hay, almost pushing a golden kind of colour in there.
But wow! And we tried this. We spoiler. We did try this the other day, and because none of us had tried it, and obviously we have to do that. And I think it's one of the coolest wines I've tried this year. And that, granted, it's only just into 2022, but yeah, it's up there.
Absolutely. What I love about it, and this is why kind of coloured outside the lines a little bit with
Yeah.
picking the wines for this is I think it's hugely important to be able to tell the story and be able to explain what this grape is about, and that Ribera isn't just a red wheat. If you look at a textbook that hasn't been updated for years,
Yeah.
it will tell you that it's 99% red, 1% rosado. There's not even a mention of whites in there. Some of them, they will blend these white grapes into their reds to add aromatics, to add lightness, but there's not a mention of white wine in the kind of like the regulated higher echelons of this. And I think they've been missing a trick for however long, because
Damn straight.
this is such
brilliant.
a good food wine. It's got this. You do get that little bit of fruit, but it's very, very savoury. It's got, for everything that you love about Chardonnay, it's got those kind of.
Caroline likes it.
Caroline's there, dumb thumbs up. Caroline's like, what have you given me?
What is?
But
it's just the most out there white wine
but
I've tried in God knows how long.
this is why I do what I do, to be able to find wines like this and share them and go, and I'm sure there's loads of people who, are on here like to explore the wines, but who's walking down, the wine shop aisle or the supermarket aisle and going,
I'd love
I fancy a glass of Albio Mayor from the Ribera, the Vineyard d'hier, the wine of yesterday.
The wines of yesterday, and it's got everything you'd look for in that sort of you take. Let's go for a synonym of wines, and let's go to Burgundy, and we'll go for a sort of a mouse. Of course, I'm going to because of quality whites. Where else are you going to go for California? Well, California is doing a great job of something a little bit different to Burgundy, but it's the same characters that make it great. This has texture. It has a slightly reductive note. Right, I'm going to explain that, because normally us stupid shirt blokes say something ridiculous like that.
There's only one stupid shirt bloke.
Okay.
It's lovely.
Very nice, but texture. What do we mean by texture?
So the texture of what? So we talk a lot about kind of like the fruitiness and these flavours that we get. But texture is when we talk about the mouthfeel, and you can get it from different things. You can get it from oak, you can get it from lees aging, where we leave the yeast and the bits and pieces in behind. But it's almost, you taste it and you almost want to chew it. It's not like you've just had a sip of something and it's gone. It's there. It's chewy. It hangs out, and
it just lays itself on your tongue, doesn't it?
Intangible. Almost like umami-ish. That it's got that. This wine's almost got a bit of meatiness about it.
I think that's a really good description. And when we're talking about
I like that. Whoever's pot in there, almost herbal. It's definitely. It's got that greenness and savouriness in a really good way. Like chewing through a herb garden.
So the other stupid
I like this.
geeky thing I said, this is great. I love it. I get some yogurt. Has it had MLF? Bit of malolactic fermentation, which is where you convert malic acid, which is apple flavors, into creamier ones.
Absolutely. This hits kind of the trifecta of this richness. So it does have it does do some mallow. It does have lees. And also it's 2018 vintage. So it's a white wine that's been aged for 4 years. So you've got that richness from that bottle age. So it does all the bits.
It really does. And the other trifecta, if you're going in that Burgundy route, what you'll often find with a Burgundy white wine, like those aged Merceaus and everything, you'll find this almost slightly, I said reductive. Oxidized wines are one way, the other way is reductive, and it doesn't really matter what that process is. It's just on one side you get things coming out that are characteristic of these sort of burnt matches and things like that, and you just get the tiny, slightly sulfurous smell. And it's like wines that are set up to have that slightly sulfurous smell are designed to age, because they get less like that the more oxygen comes through the cork and the older they get.
That's really interesting. Like these words you're using. I was teaching a WCT class this week, and we were talking about things like sulfur and struck match and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm teaching these people who they like wine but never into wine, and we use these words that when they stand alone they sound awful, don't they? Would you like to taste something that's a bit struck matchy?
I'd like a beer. I'd like a beer that tastes of a struck match,
or a bit gravelly, or a bit muddy, or a bit earthy, or leathery. It's like, how are these work?
Yeah.
But when you put them all together in the world of wine, it makes sense. It's really interesting how we describe wine with these words that stood by themselves. They don't sound enticing. But when it gets put onto a wine bottle or a wine tasting, like, you go, it all comes together.
It
what's
is
something
funny.
that's this? It's really kind of interesting because, you know, at adventurers level, it's good to get into that geekiness. But then, you know, when I go back and I'm teaching WSET level 1s and level 2s, you've kind of got to throw yourself back in and go, that actually doesn't make sense until you've taught it to somebody. So
and in a way, if you don't like those things, you know, someone has, you shouldn't have to be taught to say, I like a wine because it smells of a burnt match. Like, for God's sake, like, it's just something for you to just notice and just take. And I'm not telling you have to like it because of that, but for me, I get a tiny fraction of that, and for me, it's a really cool wine. They would work beautifully.
So, just for where we are, these grapes come from down in Ribera, which is just east of Madrid.
It is.
But Jose Soto, who is the winemaker, he's based up in Rioja, so not a million miles away. And he
actually had a family operation back in Ribera as well. So,
absolutely. So he does Verdejo, he does from Rioja, he does Garnacha, he does all kind of things. So, you know, we're not really diving too far away, but I hope you forgive me for jumping out of Ribera for a moment to be able to get a wine like this in front of you. Is there anything from the chat that needs to be addressed, Caroline?
No.
Everyone's just drinking and having a wonderful time.
I think everyone's happy. Poor old Simon is in power cut.
Oh no.
Oh no, Simon. Yeah. Well, I hope you found some ice from somewhere. Outside is quite cold at the moment, so
Well, we're going to Reds next, so
we are.
Right.
So,
we'll be all right.
So you're on the home straight.
So our thoughts are: we've got a little video just giving us an intro to the region, the grapes, all that kind of stuff, and either finish up wine number 2, or we've got about 7 minutes. So if you need to get wine number 3 in the glass and start having a little sip along with that, do that as well. And when we get back, we are going to be full blown Ribera. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
See you then.
So many of the world's top wine regions follow the path of rivers. Bordeaux with the Gironde, the Dordogne and the Garonne, Germany with the Rhine, the Nahe and the Moselle, and Rioja with the Ebro and its tributaries, and so on. Rivers have a huge influence on the climate, usually incredibly beneficial as they moderate the temperature. And that's very important for growing grapes. They don't overheat and they don't get too cold. And so the River Duero, or the Douro as it's known when it flows through Portugal, has come to be associated with one of the best regions of Spain for growing wine grapes. Like in many other regions, there's a real history here. The Romans likely cultivated vineyards, but it was, however, the monastic orders which spread wine culture in this part of Spain as far back as the 12th century. Ribera is in the region of Castilla y León, whose flag carries images of castles and lions. This symbolism represents the name for a region with a real sense of purpose and prestige. But given the dramatic geology which led to such worthwhile defensive positions in old times, it seems perhaps unlikely to be home to one of the most prestigious wine regions in Spain. But it is though that river which is the key to vibrant vineyards and the stunning wines. Both Ribera and its neighbour Rueda were given the official DO status, that is to say, a protected designation of origin, back in 1982. The potential of this area was perhaps first recognised by Alejandro Fernandez with his wine Pesquera. This was grown around the village of Pesquera del Duero, which is now just upriver from the world-famous Vega Sicilia, whose big, meaty Unico wines sell for several £100s a bottle. When Pesquera was released in 1980, it brought international recognition to the region, which encouraged more growers to start making their own wines rather than just selling the grapes to cooperatives. Now, the vineyards stretch intermittently for more than 70 miles along the River Duero. These sprawling lands feature a mix of different soils, of exposures, of elevations, some as high as half a mile above sea level. The semi-arid terrain, ample amounts of sunlight and extreme temperature swings, even with the river, create sometimes as much as a 20-degree difference during the day. And while the heat of the day causes problems for some grapes, it does create optimal ripening conditions for the thick-skinned Tempranillo, which defines the character of Ribera's wines. The grape itself is known locally as Tinta Fino. And of course it is with Tempranillo that Spain's most well-known grape that Ribera wines are generally made. Big, bold and textured, but with plenty of rich old world sensibility. These are also wines with the complexity acidity and tannin that you need for a wine to age for many years. Now, back in 1982, there were just 15,000 acres of vines and 9 wineries. That has grown hugely, as today more than 300 wineries call Ribera their home, including some of Spain's most iconic names. Because of that, the bar is set very high, and wineries seek to outdo their neighbours, creating exceptional wines, which today offer quite astonishing value compared to their French, Italian and American premium rivals. This is definitely one of the wine world's little secrets. The result of this is wines that can be enjoyed at home on an everyday table filled with rich dishes as well as charcuterie and cheese. Compared to Rioja's Tempranillo wines, the grapes and the terroir are allowed to speak for themselves a bit more and present a rich, fruity character, showing off these extreme conditions they're grown in. But they're still comfortable and hug-worthy. They're perfect for a fireside chat with the best of friends. Now, as with so many wine regions in Spain, the aging process is important to how a wine is labelled. In Ribera del Duero, it works a bit like this. Now, sorry for geeking out, but this might help you work out what is on the wine list and how you should think about it relative to its peers. The first level is called cosecha, which means harvest. This is a bit of a catch-all and can mean everything from the youngest wine to the longest aged, most sophisticated wine, as long as it comes from Ribera del Duero and meets the minimum standards. Where it gets more helpful is when we get into the Crianza, Reserva and Gran Reserva categories. For Crianza, they are aged for a minimum of 2 years with at least 1 year in oak barrels. For Reserva, they must be aged for a minimum of 3 years total with at least 1 year in oak and the remaining time in the bottle. With Gran Reserva, you're at the peak of the theoretical quality pyramid, aged for a minimum of 5 years with at least 2 years in oak and the remaining time in the bottle. But with all these things in mind, it's really important to not get too hung up on the categories. It is very possible to make a Reserva that is much better than something which has ticked all the theoretical boxes to be called a Gran Reserva. Big retailers like supermarkets put huge pressure on the producers to cut corners elsewhere so they can still bump it up a category. And after all, wine is all about the context. What is better stylistically for one situation might not be as good for another. Now, changes to the laws in 2019 finally allowed white wines to be made under the Ribera DO. These wines must contain at least 75% of a local grape called Albio. Appropriately, DNA testing has shown this to be a parent of Tempranillo. Other permitted grapes include such varieties as Albarino, Chardonnay, Riesling and Trechadora. This gives the region an opportunity to create a wider range of exciting white wines, so watch this space. So I hope that gives a little bit of context into Ribera, the region, and how to read the labels, but it really doesn't give life to this incredible region. With its gourmet food, its world-class hotels and astonishing views, and not to mention the drinks, of course. Ribera is definitely a bucket list destination for all those who care about wine. So many of the world's top wine regions follow the path.
Let us know if that didn't finish, because we're not entirely sure if it did.
The
It
joys of the
seemed to have
weather.
gone blank.
It's blowing a little bit of a gale outside,
is.
so if we missed a little bit, let us know. We'll put it back in again.
Yeah. The good news is we appear to have some spam in the chat, which is a nice thing. Caroline's just sorting that out, so thank you for that. But yeah,
We're that
we're
popular now that we're
popular,
getting
so we get
spam.
spam. Happy times.
Nice.
It's a new thing. We are going to be moving on some reds, and if you can put it into the chat where we'd got to in the video, we will update you on the last little bit of it. And sorry about that. But yes, welcome back. So whites and rosés, not massively Ribera's thing. Traditionally, but they should be.
So not massively, just because of pure amount of production. But Ribera is great. Ribera is a fun. And when I lived in the States, I used to work for a Spanish import company. We used to import a fantastic Ribera wine called Valsatillo, which is an absolutely beautiful bottle of wine. What I'd like to say about Ribera that's important, and I'm an equal opportunities wine person, okay? I'm not about bashing anything else.
And you got your Rioja diploma, haven't you?
I have. But Rioja,
Preempting.
Rioja could be more of a mixed bag. Like Rioja went through the stage that it got very, very popular. It got a brand name, and you can get a half decent Rioja for £8. You can get a really bad Rioja at £25. You can get a great, and unless you really know the producer and what you're looking for,
Yeah.
sometimes it can be tough.
I mean, the funny thing is, you say that, but from a normal person point of view, who likes things like oak and vanilla and a little bit of age,
Okay,
but not too
so
much.
maybe the
it's
value for
tough.
money is very
value for money,
difficult
exactly,
to gauge.
yeah. But it's always quite a likable wine in a simplistic way. And if I have a glass of Rioja, it takes a lot to make me really, really, really love it. But I know I'm probably not going to be, as long as I pick quite a cheap one, it's going to be pretty good.
And
It'll be okay.
And Ribera's grown slowly.
Yeah.
That sits on that pretty. We started with Vega Sicilia, and the
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
we've got to talk about is older
Alejandro,
who's the reason that is well, why are we making this bulk stuff? Let's make good stuff, and people kind of
Right.
follow that. Without him, really, it would still be a just let's make some Tempranillo, and it'd be Rioja's little brother down the road. But we've got these great wines, and when we get into our next thing, it's about there's so many different styles. We've got 100% Tempranillos. We can blend some things in. There's people trying to make a younger drinkable style. There's people who are aging in oak for 3 years, 6 years, 10 years, forever.
But it's not quite so oak dominated. It's not quite so dominated by the blend and age kind of thing as
oak still. Let's not knock it. There's still loads of oak running around. But it's not. It's not that more oak is better. More oak is better. More oak is better. There's some great elegance. There's some great power. But this, what we've got right here, the Resalte from Penify. It's big. It's bold.
I love this.
It's damp, and this does have a little bit of oak in there.
Yep.
It's technically got enough oak that it could be called a Crianza, but they don't call it a Crianza. A Crianza they have as a bigger level. And I'll just mention because we didn't do it in the little slideshow. There is one other word, and it's not a technical. Well, it is, but it's not a legal word in Asian requires. But you might see the word roble on some bottles.
Okay.
And roble technically translates as oak. So this is a wine that is not very, very young. It has seen some oak, but not enough oak to make it a Crianza. So if you do see that word roble on a bottle, that will it gives you an idea that there's been some oak in there, and nobody. He loves his rosé, doesn't he? He's back in on the rosé.
I just need my glass empty. But yeah, so I had this last night. I like to test the wines out. You like to test the wines out, and I had it with a spicy red meat based, almost kind of like pizza on a tortilla thing. And one of the big things that they do from this sort of region is these big roasted meat kind of things, those rich flavors coming in, and the tannin, the acidity just works so beautifully with that stuff. But the richness, the fact that it's not so oak dominant, the fact there's enough fruit there, it's like if you were to be adding some of those red fruits to those rich meats, like your cranberry sauce and the things, it works. It just works.
And there's also jumping back into oak, and I don't want to overly oak the situation, but what you see is a lot of Spanish Tempranillos are banged in these brand new American oak barrels.
Yes, which are cheaper, about half the price of a French.
Which does a lot of vanilla, a lot of that kind of roundness, coconutty kind of flavours. These guys do a bit of a blend, and it's about 80% French oak, 20% American, and that gives you a little bit more elegance about the wine. You've got elegance, you've got power. Fist in a velvet glove. Can I say that? No. Okay, I'm not going to use that. But it is. It's the iron fist in a velvet glove.
They say that. And one of the other things you can do with the oak to moderate its tendencies is to what they call toast it. And that means lighting a fire in the barrel when it's just been made. And that sounds a little extreme, but it genuinely, it just takes this rough kind of new wood, and it will have been seasoned for a few years, but it's a bare wood finish, and they just basically light this fire, and it hardens the wood, and it provides a caramelization of the kind of the sugars that are in the wood, and that transfers into the wine.
you can't just drink this, can you?
No.
You've got to hold it in your mouth. So I'm like taking a sip of it. I need to finish this so I can talk again.
It was so much better with the food. I can't even begin to describe. It's really nice, but it was just incredible with that spicy meat.
And I think what we can talk a little bit about food pairing and what I love about Tempranillo. And it's kind of weird that I say this because it sounds like I'm a massive fan of this grape. But for me, Tempranillo doesn't go perfectly with anything. No. There's not often that I get a dish and go, Tempranillo go really well with that. Yeah. But if you've got a group of people who have different tastes, or you're in a restaurant and someone's having a lamb shank and someone's having a burger and someone's having mushroom ravioli and someone's a bottle of Tempranillo, especially from Ribera, in the middle of the table is going to go delightfully with everything. It's a real...
I think you're right.
It's a real winner. Yeah. It's got amazing versatility. It doesn't go overly green like a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's not overly acidic like a Pinot Noir. It's the best of all worlds.
And with a Pinot, that could get dominated by some flavours. I love a good Pinot, but I might have mentioned that. But I've had Pinot Noirs with your oak grilled steaks and things like that, and it does work in a way. But actually, I think this would work better. I really do. So
you've got to drink good wines that you love with good food that you want to eat.
Yeah,
you don't need to get too bogged down.
There's nothing that's like there's no situation before. If anyone's seen the film, and yes, we're running out of time, of course. But if anyone's seen the film Sideways, the characters go to this grill restaurant, and it's where and it's one of the best places. It's just I've gone in there and I've chatted to winemakers, to people who bring barrels into California, to people who run companies who bring workers around to do all the pruning and stuff like that. It's just such a little hotbed of it. But the food is astonishing, and they make their own wines there, and it's brilliant together. But it's not your classic pairings. It's like, why would you have this incredibly rich sort of strong flavoured, strong oak smoked steaks with a light-skinned grape like a Pinot Noir? It's not your classic pairing. That would be a more classic pairing. But you're right. At that time, I wouldn't have had anything different at all.
it becomes a drink what you love. Drink what you love. I can tell you stories about drinking Gewürztraminer with ribeye steaks that were delicious.
Yeah.
Best pairing in the world? No. But was the wine great and the food was great with the right people, the right environment? And that's what really matters.
So wine number 3, the Risalte, Origen. So you have this denomination Origen, Ribera. It was in existence, and there were people like Vega Sicilia who were doing their Unico wines for a while, and then we get Alejandro who does this thing, which gets Pescara, who gets international recognition. But they've been there. They've been there for a while, so you can find some really quite old ones. And Vega Sicilia Unico, you genuinely are talking probably like £400-500 a bottle, aren't you?
And it's a mental wine. It is absolutely. If you ever
speak for yourself, I've never tried it, of course, but
sorry about that.
It was at the last sommelier. So I'm going to big up Jamie, because Jamie is about to compete in the International Sommelier of the Year competition. I believe the last one that I watched had to blind a Vega Sicilia Unico, and it was really fascinating watching the process that these professionals went through. And Jamie beat. I think you got through the all of the regional.
No, I was at regionals.
You were at exactly at
regionals. So fingers crossed I can go
one step further.
Step further.
Happy times.
If not, I get to drink some good wine and
exactly, yeah. Some of the competitions that they have to do, right? So they'll give you a massive bottle, like a Magnum or a Jeroboam or something, and then you have to pour it out equally between a certain number of glasses. What are the other things you have to do with that?
So it's really fun. So should we put wine number 4 in the glass while I talk through this? Oh, okay. I'll get back to sommeliers momentarily. No, we'll sort it out in a second.
That's fine. Questions. Can you tell us what we taste on number 3?
So wine number 3 for me is you've got these big, bold, dark fruits. It's blackberry, it's blackcurrant. So that's where we are with those primary fruits. When we go into the secondary, you've got that little bit vanilla, that little bit of toast, that little bit which from there.
Caroline,
And
do you,
then-
want, do you want to quickly pop up while we do this, do you want to pop up on the graphics the WCT thing? There we go. Yeah. So primary, we're talking about the fruit-based flavors, and secondary, it's about the winemaking flavors, and tertiary, it's about the age. Not much on the age yet. This is quite a young one.
Yeah, but you've still got
A
a
little
little
bit.
bit. You've got a little bit of smokiness. You've got
Yeah.
a little bit of leather. You've got a little bit of that forest floor kind of thing. So
A bit of clothes.
that's your winemaking.
I
That's
think-
right
I
in the
think-
middle.
I think that's the
your
barrels.
Absolutely. So that's where you get a little bit of that spice characteristic coming through.
Which again is really dependent on the toast. How hard you toast that barrel really makes.
I like my
more
toast with butter and jam.
Marmite.
Helpful.
I mean, everybody likes Marmite. We can all agree on
Well,
that.
you do. I don't. So there we are. Point is proven. No. Oh, is that my birthday present out the
Black
window?
fruits. So we're talking black fruits specifically, not your Pinot Noir, your cherries, your strawberries. This is
Absolutely.
more,
It's blackberry, blackcurrant,
yeah,
plummy.
kind of
And
like-
then you've definitely got that clove, that spice, and then you've got this little touch of smoke, this little touch of earth. So it's and having those
and
gives
that
all
kind
those
of gives it away.
components.
Despite New World wines generally being more fruity, and this is on the fruity side of Old World wines, but that kind of hint of those earthy, mushroomy forest floor flavors is a bit of a hint that this is an Old World wine.
No, absolutely. Like there is big fruit, but there's enough spice, enough toasted. And as I keep saying, Old World and New World is kind of melding a little bit with climate change and people trying to do things stylistically.
Yeah.
And it's much more about knowing who the wine is and whether the wine's good than playing whether it's Old World or New World, in my opinion.
Great question. So why don't we see more Ribera in shops and restaurants?
So Ribera is great. Generally, they are, and once again, this is my very general blanket price, but generally they're going to be a little bit more expensive than some of the other Spanish wines that you
Just 'cause
see,
they're rarer.
because they're
Yeah.
rarer. And it's the same with any wine in the world, that once people start buying it and it gets known, 10 years ago, you wouldn't buy an Argentinian Malbec in England,
No,
would you?
no.
Nowhere. You wouldn't see
No
it.
one had that.
But it got that. New
Yeah.
Zealand Sauvignon Blanc 20 years ago. It was
Yeah.
very rare. So what it comes with is basically people knowing about it, buying it, and wineries will ship to markets where they're going to sell it. And also, Ribera isn't the world's most massive producer. A lot of their stuff is sold and drunk locally.
Yeah.
And it's finding these
You'll
these
spot a
hidden
lot
gems.
of it on the Michelin-starred Spanish restaurants. And if you're a big restaurant person, you will go and look at the top, 50 restaurants in the world. You'll be staggered at how many of them are in Spain. And when you go and look at their wine list, lots of Ribera on there.
Lots of Ribera. You look at
Yeah.
Pesquera all over the place. Valsotia, Vega Sicilia, those kind of guys. Lots of icon wines. So it's the new Rioja. I'm going to put my hands up and say, absolutely not. Rioja does what it does, and Ribera does what it does. Toro does what it does. It's.
Do you know what? It's
what's
a rare
important
thing where you
is-
get such a clear statement out of people.
Yeah.
You're never going to be a politician.
No, I'm not. Well, I've almost got the haircut for it. But what with trends will change and people go after things. We used to all drink. It was Muscadet, then it was Pinot Grigio, then it's something else, and these trends move. What
You have a lot of common values.
it might become as popular as Rioja,
Yeah.
but it's its own style in its own place, and that's what makes me very excited about wine regions that don't try and chase to be something else. Don't try and be Chablis. Don't try and be Rioja. Don't try and be your own. And I will die. And like you've talked about Burgundy, I'm going to talk about Australia. When I went to Margaret River, I tasted this Chardonnay, and we talked about it, and we said, at one end it's got this nuance of Burgundy, at the other end it's got this nuance of Napa, and the winemaker was like, it's amazing to be kind of in those categories, but I want someone to pick up my glass of wine and go, that's a glass of Margaret River Chardonnay. And what I think you see from Ribera is people want you to pick up their glass of wine and go, that's Ribera. It's not trying to copy Rioja. It's not trying to be anything else.
So if you're saying,
it could
is
have
is
growth.
Ribera going to be the new Rioja, as in the new cool region of Spain that people are going to go, oh, I'd love a glass of Ribera? I think yes is the answer. But is it the same as Rioja? Absolutely
No.
not.
Could it trend?
Could it trend and
Absolutely.
be what you like? I think so.
But it's
yeah.
not going to replace. It's not like if
But
you.
for now, the lovely thing is that while it's not trending like that, go and buy it. It's great value. It's genuinely.
Once people get to know about
Yeah.
it, the prices all go
Don't
up.
tell anybody else. It's all good, so we can just drink it.
Exactly.
So I think we should move on to wine number 5, which is the Vineyard Mayor Tempranillo Crianza. Now, Crianza is,
We're not.
Tempranillo Crianza.
We're not going to talk about.
Yeah.
Bruno. We probably should.
Oh, okay. We can talk about wine.
Okay, childish jokes over.
Childish jokes over.
They were good though.
It was worth doing.
That was worth you putting it
You know,
in the brochure, and I can't wait. Did you do a song about it as well?
I didn't.
Lucky.
No, I'm saving that. I thought it was all right. We don't
Okay.
talk about Pinot. Was the winemaker's shirt
Exactly.
that was going around.
So,
this week.
where are we going to? So, wine number 4. This is Finca Villacreques. Okay. So,
Cosecha. So this is, as you saw on the video, this means harvest, which is really unhelpful.
yeah, but when we dive onto the next wines, we'll do a little bit more about those scales and what those.
Vega
those rules are.
Sicilia Unico is a cosecha.
Absolutely, and
So it doesn't mean anything.
Sassicaia is a table wine.
Yeah, exactly.
but
it's not a Chianti.
It shows you where you are.
Should be.
So what this is, these guys make some really solid, like high-end, well-aged, lots of oak, lots of power wine. This Pruno was designed to make something a little bit lighter, easier drinking, that you didn't need to worry about aging it, cellaring it, any of that kind of stuff. Which was
Caroline's gone to turn Alexa off.
So that's what makes this interesting. And, wineries, Spain in general, because of their aging rules, once the wine gets released, it's generally drinkable. You look at, these big Barolos and things like this out of Italy, you got to age it for 10 years. But what they're trying to make here is a wine that you open it, it's drinkable. Could you age it for 5 years? Absolutely. Yeah. But it's designed to be drunk younger now. Yeah. Done. And with this, we've got a little bit of a blend. So we're still mainly Tempranillo, 90%.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit Cabernet Sauvignon in here.
Mm.
And what that does is it gives you this little bit more fleshiness about it, this little bit more juiciness. And a touch of green kind of herbaceousness in there.
Yeah. Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc are less so Cabernet Franc, but they're all associated with this kind of green flavour you get with tomatoes, stalks, green tomatoes, leaves, and those kind of things. There's pyrazines, isn't it? I think if I remember right from a long time ago. Mm-hmm. It feels like, but yeah, it's that green flavour. So, but only 10% of it, you get barely any of that, just enough to give you a slight hint of the herbaceousness, like going out into the garden. And I think that's really nice. It's more tannic than the Origen de Rosante, but
it's a bit more chewy.
Exactly.
A bit more chewy.
It's a food wine.
You're tasting like tomato leaves. I usually just eat the tomatoes.
So
I leave the other bit alone.
You leave the other bit well alone. So don't eat the tomato leaves, but if you grow tomatoes, you will spot there's a really like chemicals that we can smell.
Aren't tomato leaves poisonous?
I don't know.
So have you been licking tomato? And I've heard that tasting though from a lot of things, but I've never had or eaten a tomato leaf.
It's more a question of rubbing the tomato leaf, and there are some chemicals which are really, really easy for us to detect. Like you have such a low threshold for you to notice this chemical, and it genuinely it's one of those ones which is quite high up there. Because it was designed to turn you off from eating it. You don't want to eat these things that have that green flavour. It's generally seen as underripe. And so it's designed to stop us eating them because the seeds are
So
not
we
ready yet.
so we
because,
drink them
because,
instead.
because tomatoes are not vegetables; they're fruits, as I'm sure all of our children know and everyone. But why do these chemicals exist? They exist to stop us eating them before we can do the job that fruit wants us to do. It wants us to take it around the world and spread the seeds. So if the seeds aren't ready yet, they give you that green flavour to try to stop you eating it. So that's why a lot of people can be slightly turned off by a Cab Franc or a Cab Sauvignon that's a bit underripe. And it was probably the biggest discovery, I'd say, of the Napa wine industry was how to make sure that you didn't get those. They stopped focusing on the simplistic chemical. Is there enough sugar? Is there enough alcohol? Is the acidity right? They worked out. Does it smell unpleasant? It's that classic New World thing. Like, throw away everything else that everyone else in the world goes, and does it taste nice?
Exactly, but as Simon's point on there,
Yeah.
it's definitely got this earthiness.
Has
It's
a little
definitely got
bit.
this greenness that you
Yeah.
get from your cab, a bit more chewy.
But a tiny, tiny amount of it. So in that lower amount, it can become quite a pleasant sort of floral thing. And, I like it. So we got. I didn't see Magda's comment. Wow, this really has. Oh,
Here it comes.
pine needles. Pine needles. Wow, yeah.
It does. It's very
Sappy kind
should
of.
we have it Christmas time? Christmas wine. No, I'm not going to do singing today. It's not good for me.
The Paul has said this,
Yeah. So
and my comment was this.
yeah. So
Yeah, what she said.
foods bring this life, but there's no pressure on you to like this more than the others, because the great thing about Ribera is that now we've introduced that like character, as we go to the other two, it's gone. So loads of people love Cabernet Sauvignon. There's massive following behind Bordeaux style wines,
Yeah, absolutely. And
and there are other people who don't like it. And
this isn't something that I would sit and drink 2 or 3 glasses of, because it's got that chewiness about it. But you have this there's a suckling lamb called lecheso in Spain, something like that, with that fattiness and that richness would be really, really good with us. And it is when we do this wine tasting, we sit and we're doing 6 wines back to back to back to back to back on an evening,
it's very
not
different
with
when
not
you're
dinner
not halfway
or
there.
food or things like that. And it is when we taste these wines, it's not always about do you like it right now. It's like, where can we put this in the real world? If I was having this and this
Where
and
does
this,
it fit?
would that go with this? If I was doing that, this goes with that. And we've got very different places that we would drink the rosé we had first, compared to when we would drink that, compared to when we drink the Albio, compared to when we drink that. And the joy of what we do is his ability to showcase these wines, and hopefully you can find a home for them at some point, and that goes there. But also, if you don't love it, you go, we won't talk about Bruno. And on that note, I'm going home.
On that note. So I've had this with food, and it was a totally different experience. And it was again for the Risalte. So these are food wines. So if you've got a lump of cheese and some, if you happen to have, some nice Iberico ham in the fridge, or a suckling lamb, or something like that, it's just a classic Spanish dish. Go and get it now. Good time to go and grab it. But it is a great place to go and eat as well as to go and drink. And
it is. There's a lot of fun stuff going on.
Your Galician state, Galicia, like just to the northwest of where we are there. Seriously, the best. Honestly, I think, and I've had some of the best Japanese steak. Well, I think Galician steak is every bit as good. Every bit as good.
When are you inviting me and all our members out to Galicia to have steak with you? Next year, fantastic. So, where we're at is we've done 4 wines.
Well, Caroline's going there in a couple of months, isn't she? The question is, when's she inviting us?
Yeah, that's important.
Never inviting you two.
Rude. Anyway, so
right. Amazing question from the amazing Magda.
Oh, Magda, great question.
So that is a fantastic question. So it is getting warmer everywhere, and things are, what they've got there though that is a level. I say a level of luck is there's lots of waterways which can either cool or moderate temperatures.
It really helps.
And they do have a large diurnal shift right now. So they're able to be warm in the day, cooler at night, which allows for consistent ripening. So we don't know what's going to happen with climate change, and it's very scary for a lot of people. But my opinion is, in the short term, they have this kind of change in temperature that they can have a long enough growing season that if they do need to pick a little bit earlier than previously, they're still going to be able to get enough fruit ripeness and balance of fruit and phenolic ripeness to still be able to make a wine. They're not going to have to leave it and suddenly have a 16% wine or a sweet wine with a load of residual sugar in. There's a lot going on in the wine world, and you can talk about that with just about every region in the world, and it is a little bit scary. But we're seeing wines being grafted onto different things. You look at Bordeaux, that they're allowing new grapes to be blended in. So I don't know if they stick with what they're doing, just doing Tempranillo, it might be tough. But if they're allowed to put more of other grapes in and other things will be planted to go into the blend to bring those together, that could be it. But Ribera with the waterways, with a diurnal shift, it gives them the opportunity. If they do need to pick a bit earlier, they should be okay-ish.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough. It's really tough because there's the ripening of the sugars and there's the ripening of the flavours, and these don't always go on the same line. One can go a bit steeper than the other. How quickly the sugar ripens is a factor of how many leaves you have catching the sun. They are like solar panels, and they catch that sun, and they make sugar, and it gets pumped down into the plant and back up to the grapes. And that's the entire purpose. So what you can do is have fewer leaves,
and you got sunburn,
and then you get sunburn. Exactly, it's really tough. So it's trying to so we're talking about pruning in England specifically in our little video because it's that time of the year where we're pruning. They pruned in Spain months ago, probably in December, and what they will have been doing is that with these, they go for these bush vines where they do spur pruning. Remember that spur pruning, which is down to just a single or two buds that make a few shoots from each side of the vine. That creates these little fingers that grow out. That each year that goes by, these little fingers get longer, and the more leaves you have, the more shade they provide to keep the grapes from sunburn. But also, the more sunlight they catch and the more sugar they generate. It's really tough. So they are starting to look at more alternative ways of doing this. They can spray clay onto the leaves.
Basically, sun cream.
Sun cream the leaves.
Grapes.
Exactly. Yeah, sun cream the grapes. Yeah.
You can have a lot of people just with umbrellas.
But it is a tough thing because you have to do this in advance, and you have to work out what's likely to happen. So it's a tough job, but yeah, they're working on it, and ultimately they don't have many tools in their toolkit that they haven't used already. So it's a tough one, really, really difficult. Spain finds this really hard. Remember, we spoke to Tom from Paso Primero, who was unpolitically correct. No, not politically. He was, when you've got a PR trained person who will say, we had a terrible vintage this year, but it allowed us to make the best wines ever. Or we had a great vintage, which allowed us to make the best wines ever. Or we had a mediocre vintage, which allowed us to make the best wines ever. So Tom just was on like, so it's bloody hard trying to make wine when it's that hard. He was honest about it. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Absolutely. So where we're going to go next is it's Alex's few minutes on winemaking, but for this month it's out in the vineyard because it's pruning time. So where we're going to go, we're going to do this. We're then going to do we're going to do two wines from the same winery. So if you've got two glasses, it might make sense to have both of them. We'll pour them side by side.
Would.
Enjoy your Risotto. Enjoy your Pruno.
But also, I'm going to say goodnight because I'm going to hand over to the lovely Caroline, who is going to come in and
Caroline, have we?
Caroline.
Yeah.
Caroline's going to come in and offer you the benefit of her many years of training in this. So I'm going to go to the producer seat, say good night, enjoy the film, and enjoy the last 2 wines. They're great.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's finish these, get your next 2 in the glass, and we'll be back after Alex has finished whittling on about sticks.
After the harvest of grapes back in the autumn, vines go into a state of dormancy over the winter to protect themselves from the cold. The leaves all drop off and the stalks turn from a vibrant green into brown in a process called lignification. This forms a hard woody layer over the top of the living plant. A vine grows in little segments called nodes, and at each of these nodes is where the leaves, the tendrils, and also the grapes grow. During the winter season, this is where buds are generated on every single node, and inside that bud, the future of the plant is already defined. All the new shoots, the leaves and the flowers are all there in embryonic form. There are even 2 backup buds for just in case the frost kills off the primary one. But the trouble is, there are just far too many of them. All the new growth which came from one bud the previous year will create maybe 20 or 30 of its own buds the next year. It's exponential growth, and that leads to underripe grapes. It would also be all over the place, so we need to prune, and we have now come to the perfect time of the year in England to prune our vines. We want to do this as late as we can, which delays when the buds pop open and become vulnerable to the frost. We also want to do this when it's still very cold, the sap hasn't started to rise up into the dormant plant, and we want to do this when it is dry and preferably a little bit breezy, so disease cannot get in where we just basically cut a massive hole in the plant. Pruning is a massive gambling act because you never know what kind of a growing season is coming up. If it's a great one and you leave too few buds, then the shoots will grow like crazy and the grapes will ripen far too early, making really high alcohol wines with quite unpleasant flavours. But if you leave too many, the opposite will happen. Not enough sugar to make alcohol and very sour, bitter grapes. So pruning is an exercise in trying to work out how many grapes you're going to grow this year from each vine and getting them to go where you want them, all at the same height, getting ripe at the same time. Now the gardeners out there will probably know this, but there are essentially 2 methods of pruning: cane pruning and spur pruning. Cane pruning is generally used in places like Chablis, England, Alsace and Champagne, where it's just a bit cooler, and you'll find plenty of spur pruning in warm regions like Spain and Australia. Now spur pruning is generally seen as being a lot easier and lower cost. It can quite often be done by machine, but it can be more susceptible to disease. And that is because with cane pruning you replace a lot of the wood every single year. If you look at 2 young vines, you'll really struggle to see much difference. They're the same shape, but it gets exaggerated every year that goes by. An old spur-pruned plant will have these thick arms which reach out from the central trunk, whereas a cane-pruned plant will have a thick trunk but spindly little arms. It took me quite a long time to really get this difference, with several months of sitting in freezing cold vineyards wearing thermal socks. And I've now got a couple of vines that I keep in my garden as examples of how this all works, so I can show you. Now it's important to remember that on both of these methods, all new shoots and grapes pretty much come from the wood that grew just last year. So that's what we're deciding what we leave behind, 1-year-old wood. With a cane-pruned plant, we take 1 or 2 of the shoots that grew last year, we cut everything else away and we bend them down to be horizontal. These canes will have buds all the way along them, perhaps every 15 to 20 centimetres. We leave as many buds as we decide the plant will be able to cope with the next year, which depends on how hot it is. And that is called the charge. There are some calculations to help you work out what the charge should be, how many buds to leave, based on how much of the wood you cut off last year. With spur pruning it's a lot easier. We cut each of last year's shoots back just down to a tiny little spur, maybe just 5 centimetres long, that has just 1 or 2 buds on it. On a cordon training system, which is say the classic shape with 2 arms sticking out the side, these spurs are all roughly at the same height along a wire, which means that the pruning pretty much follows a horizontal line along the rows of vines. A tractor with a big mechanical cutting wheel can be used to do this, and then a viticulturist follows along and makes slightly more accurate cuts. And that is why it's generally only done for premium wines. But does that difficult system make the wine taste any better? To be honest, I don't think so. To me, cane pruning is more of an insurance policy against having a disease get into the pruning wound and kill one of the arms of your vine that's maybe been growing for 50 years, and that halves your yield. But it also gives a lot more flexibility in a changing environment, which is perhaps why it is so popular in this country, where everything is being worked out for the first time.
I'm here. Hi, I'm Caroline, for anyone who doesn't know me. Okay. Well, just in case, any of people. No, okay.
Okay, fantastic. So, we've done Alex's cooking. Yeah,
Basically, custom. Yeah.
exactly. The main reason I don't have anything that is not Alex. Years of previous work, so I've got about why you can do
Yeah, so he chose the easy option of doing this instead because it's a lot easier.
easy way out, absolutely. So, anyway, where have we gone? So we've done rosé, we've done white, we've done special, we've done some Duero, and now we are jumping into a little bit of talk about aging in the dairy. And
Oh, okay. Not in like because I age and they stuff.
we're making the jokes, aren't we? Right, Caroline's going to run the rest of this.
Aging. What's the answer? Oh, shut up.
Okay, so obviously on we did it was in the initial video, just a little bit of just the level for quality. We start with our okay.
So that's what we know from that's what we know.
Exactly. We then have a roble, which is the host, but most people aren't, they're not legal classification.
Right.
We then go to Pianza, we then have Reserva, we have Grand Reserva. And what will happen is, people from the wine to the regulated. And I don't know if it's not very right. We're going to turn these round to the back of the bottle, yeah? The blade.
Oh,
Where's my friend?
I've spotted a difference.
Is he Nick Bruno? No. So when you send your wine in to say what you want to do, you go, I've made cans, I've made this, we can test it, check the time what you make, and you will get sent these labels. And depending on what level of wine you're at, with your pleasure, your purple, with your Crianza, yeah.
At all? They can't hear at all, or they can't hear me.
Golden. Yeah. We'll go back. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Ah,
are we back?
I hope so.
fantastic. So, apologies for that. So we will go back into.
So sorry.
Yeah, Caroline came over. And
I broke the internet again. I
Exactly.
do tend to do that.
So where we were at wine aging. So where we are, and if you've heard all this before, shout at me and I will skip. But we'll go back to where we were at. So when we see wines in Ribera de Duero, we've got these different aging levels. Some are classified and some are not. Some are guides. So we can start with a wine that is our Joven, which is our young wine, generally no to very little oak. We then have Roble, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. And both of those will go under the Capsule Cosecha label. So when we get that, you'll see this. You'll get a little purple label that comes with it, purple burgundy.
I'd say that
Magenta.
was fuchsia,
Fuchsia.
actually.
Okay, fuchsia. And this is what Caroline here for the colour palette matching. So we've got our fuchsia label. So that's what you'll see on something that hits the DO criteria for Ribera del Duero, but doesn't hit any of the aging criteria. We then go up to Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. And what you've got with these levels is there's a balance of aging. There's a certain amount of time it has to be kept in the barrel, and then a certain amount of time before it's released. And there can be a bit of a mix and match. So what you'll see for a Crianza is it has to be aged for at least 12 months in the barrel, and then more time before it's released. Reserva is the same. It's 12 months, but it's then got to be 36 months of total time before it's released. You can have it longer in the barrel if you want. You can do 18 months, 24 months, whatever. So these are minimum specifications.
Yeah.
So you'll see some producers will just do 12 months in the barrel and then whatever the minimum requirement is and get it out the door. Some people will do longer because they want to do it. And because there's minimum requirements, some people with the Grand Reservers will leave it in an oak barrel for 4, 5, 6 years and then not release it for 10 years total because that's what they want to be doing.
So is it fair to say, Jamie, that this
Probably.
is where in the realms of Ribera del Duero that you get into a bit of a minefield? Because I would assume that some producers can, for example, keep grapes that are really Crianza level for longer in order to call it Reserva, and actually you're not getting a better wine.
So this is what's important is what is Crianza level. Crianza level isn't about the quality of the grape or what it is.
It's about
Crianza
age,
is an aging process. So as long as it's the right grapes and it's aged for the right amount of time, it's Crianza. So yes, you could technically take the same grapes, chuck them all in a barrel and leave it in a barrel for 12 months, and a year after that you could release some of it as Crianza and some you could just hold for another year to call it Reserva, and you could do that. What you find is most people who are doing a quality wine will pick certain vineyards that they want to be that Crianza, that slightly easier style. Certain vineyards will be designated for Reserva and certain vineyards will be designated for Grand Reserva. But it is each their own. And what you should find from a quality producer is there's a definite differentiation in style as you go through. You do have a lot of, if you go in, and they have these aging requirements all over Spain. They do, float around some parts of Spain. There's a 6-month aging requirement to be a Crianza. So not all Crianzas from Spain are
because the rules are different in Ribera to total Spain, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So,
it's stricter and longer aging requirements compared to just about anywhere else in Spain for Ribera de Duero to look after the quality of the wine. So you should have this absolutely difference in style that you'll go richer, bolder, heavier from your lighter, fruitier Crianza styles. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other. A lot of the reason for the expenses, yes, they go after maybe some better grapes, but it's about time. It's about time and real estate, because if you've got to hold on to a bottle for 3 years before you sell it, or 5 years or 10 years, you've got to have that wine in a barrel that can't be used for anything else, in a space that can't be used anything else. And if you wanted to start from scratch, and want to make a Gran Reserva Tempranillo, you plant some Tempranillo, you're not getting your first proper yield for what,
5 years. Yeah.
Okay, and then we've got another minimum 5 years of prep and aging. You've got to be able to invest a 10-year business plan without getting a penny back before you put that bottle on the shelf to sell to somebody.
That's a hell of an upfront investment. And what springs to mind while you were saying that is that I've always been taught wine is a perfect blend of art and science. Actually, wine is a blend of art, science, and commercials. You've got to, you're doing it ultimately to sell it and make money, and you've got to work out whether that investment in time and space is worth the money that you think you can make off the back of that. But equally, going back to I've definitely opened a bottle of Reserva wine, and it just feels a little bit tired.
Okay.
And I think that is where possibly in some more mainstream retail establishments, shall we say.
That's very wine snobby of you.
It is very wine snobby, but it is adventurous. And I'm not a wine snob, really. That they're probably pushing some of their preferred partners to just keep the Crianza wines a little bit longer so they can put Reserva on the label. And
it is. There's so much that goes on behind the label. But what we hope is, people need to be upfront and honest about what's going in their bottle. You can if you want to, pull the wool over your consumer's eyes, you can try and do that till the cows come home.
Didn't we get a bottle of wine?
You'll get caught out, and this is why I think, if you taste the Crianza, if you taste these two wines side by side and go the Crianza Reserva, and you can't tell there's a difference, they're not doing it right.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking we haven't tasted these on camera yet, have we?
Go on, then.
Shall I taste them?
Yeah. Tasting notes from Caroline coming
Oh
up.
God.
So with where we go, the extra effort, I think that comes down to what you think at home. Do you think the wine is different, better, more delicious, or do we think it's same difference? Doesn't matter. But we go in with the thought that it's not about them being the same wine or different wine. The Crianza for me, light, fresh, much more fruit forward. The Reserva, richer, rounder, more fruit in, more of that vanilla, that toastiness. One is I'm going to sit and drink a couple of glasses of it. The other one I'm going to have dinner with.
Number 6 is sexy wine, I have to say. Do you know what? I have to say this, and I put it on the chat earlier when I was behind the desk, the production desk. For me, the Online Wine Tasting Club is all about helping people find their new favourite wine, understanding what they like and why, and understanding what they don't like and why, so that they can go forward and choose confidently. I've been in the wine trade for far too many years, 20 something years.
Months.
And tonight I found 2 new favourite wines, and that's the joy of what we do, is that you're constantly discovering and uncovering these new gems. It's amazing.
Absolutely. So should we open the pouches in advance and let them breathe? This once again, it comes down to personal preference. Because I am a weirdo. Okay, well, we know that. That wasn't part of the remit. The pouches, if you want to do, if we have these big heavy wines, you can open them up and pour them and let them breathe and all that kind of stuff. I'm not a fan of that, because I like to kind of open the wine and start with it and swirl it and taste it and give it a couple of minutes and see how it develops in the glass. I would say if you're doing a dinner party and you've got one bottle of it and you're going to share it with, everybody are going to have like half a glass of each and that's it and move on to the next course. Yeah, maybe decant, maybe do that, maybe get a bit of air into it. But I'd like to open it up kind of as I'm going to go. You know, we open these bottles, you know, a la minute and go with it. So it comes down to personal preference. If you open it up, you get a bit of oxygen in it, you give it a little bit of a swirl. Yeah, great. But so many wines, more and more, are being designed to be drunk as they come. Yeah, not decant for 3 hours, not doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think with most wines, if you've got a big glass with a nice surface area in it, you pour some out, you get some oxygen in there. In 5-6 minutes, you're going to be there anyway. You know, if we were doing a set of Bordeaux from 1960, it might be a different kettle of fish. But I think these wines are designed to be drunk now. They've already done how many months in barrel and however months in bottle. They've had a lot of time to develop anyway. We've not got this big Barolo that needs to lay down for 10 years. These wines are designed to be open and drunk and go from there.
I think that's really interesting, actually, that comment here. Simon, in the dark. Simon in the dark. I really do feel for you tonight. But I was just thinking while Jamie was talking, wine number 3, the Rosé, completely did that for me. So when it was first poured into my glass, I was like, oh, wow, that's a really big wine. And I'm not sure that's, without a lovely steak dinner or something like that, I'm not sure I can just drink all of that. But I came back to it a couple of minutes later and it had changed. It had opened up. It was the more of the fruit was coming through. It was a more interesting, more complex wine rather than just a load of, tannins hitting me. And I like both of these wines for the reasons that we've said and for the reasons that you're all commenting on at home, is that wine number 5 it's younger, it's fruitier, it's juicier, it's easier going. It could be a sit on the sofa with Netflix kind of wine. Wine number 6 is that step up and is what we were saying that, you don't sometimes get. And that is why it's such a wonderful example of Crianza to Reserva, because it warrants food, it warrants something to go
and
with
it. Also, this particular winery, so the winemaker there was Spain's first female master of wine. So you've got a real good name, someone who knows what they're talking. It's not someone, I'm just going to make some wine. So she obviously knows what's going on. But you've got in the Crianza, they pick the grape and they do. But in the Reserva, it's all hand harvested. They sort the grapes twice. They de-stem them before they get. So it's a different level of winemaking, and it doesn't mean that the Crianza is a lazy bad level of winemaking.
No,
it just goes to the next effort. And what I'd really be intrigued to see, obviously, if you want to, sneak around behind, you can look at the website now. But when we put the prices up, I'd be really interested to see what people's concept and thoughts are. Because a lot of people are like, yeah, it's worth the extra effort. Yeah, I think this is a rich, better wine. I'm just intrigued what people might think about, would they spend the extra money to jump to the Reserva? Because at the end of the day, we can pour all the great wines in the world. We can pour, whatever we want to do. But the wine has to offer value for money. If you go, oh, at 10 quid, that's really good. But at 18 quid, I wouldn't touch it. Or at 50 quid, it's fantastic.
But it's like with anything, I think you get what you pay for. And you're absolutely right. With the Crianza is a lovely, lovely wine. It's not a bad wine. What we're trying to do with these 2 wines is demonstrate the step up that you get. And a genuine Crianza to Reserva, and this is why it's great doing it from the same vineyard, of the same winery, is that they will be picking the grapes from a better vineyard site, and what that means is that it's more exposed to the sun, it has more daylight hours, it's on a hill, so the vines have to work harder to get the nutrients, and so the fruit is more expressive. And the winemaking techniques with the oak aging and everything else, there's just more craft, there's more workmanship. But that all costs money. Coming back to commercials, that all costs money. So
wouldn't it be great if grapes and wine were free?
wouldn't it? I mean,
Let's
I'm
work
not
on
going to
that.
say that; it'd be slightly controversial. But you do get what you pay for, as with anything in life. And so, if you want to sit in front of the telly, easy drinking kind of wine, yes, why pay more for a more complicated wine that possibly wouldn't go with the occasion? But I think the Reserva is just a really beautiful wine.
It is, and I think it just truly shows. I think what we've seen today, take the Albio out. The Albio is phenomenal, but just what Tempranillo can be. It's not one size fits all. It can be velvety and smooth and lush. It can be fruity, easy drinking. It can be bold and be a little bit grippy and over the top, or it can make a delicious light, fresh rosé. It is, and exploring these new regions is what's phenomenal, to showcase that you don't always have to go after the big name region. You can go after somewhere else and show that they're still making quality wines that are absolutely beautiful, that people care about, that are well made, that are delicious, that are good drinking. And there's rules and regulations in place to protect both the winemakers and also the consumers. You take Reserva when you go into California. What does Reserva mean? Absolutely nothing.
Well, didn't we saw a wine recently from Spain, and it was called Reserva Seleccionado. That actually is a nothing title. It literally means nothing. It's a marketing ruse.
Yeah. So if you see Reserva and you want it to be done, it's got to have the label. If it doesn't have the label, it's not guaranteed to be that, to fit in the rules of the DO. So have we got any last points, questions, or that in there?
By the way, Julia, can I just say cheeky looking at the prices in advance?
Cheeky. Oh, we'll have to hide them. We'll put them all up at like £5,000 a bottle next month.
Yeah, we will, just for Julia.
Exactly. But yeah, so what have we got? What have we got going on? What's coming up? So,
should we see the prices?
We can put the prices up.
We can put the prices up.
The prices up while I talk about what's going on next month. So, we see the rosé, I think, is phenomenal value for money. You see the Crianza and Reserva, definitely a bit of a jump. It's not massive.
It's not a huge jump, though.
You're definitely going to a different level, that pre-20, post-20 price point.
Yeah, compare that to a Burgundy.
Oh, why would you compare it to a Burgundy?
I think it was Simon that commented about the comparison between the Risalte and the Reserva. They're absolutely on a par in terms of price as well. So I think they're both great wines.
Absolutely. So coming up, what are we doing? Well, we're redoing our Spanish tasting.
Well, no, we haven't done it yet because you were a poorly badger.
Because I ran away. But next month we are doing, for our Discoverers level, we're doing Austrian wines, which is really exciting.
You don't know much about Austria.
I'm going again.
Yeah, we're getting rid of him finally.
So we got Austrian wine coming up, and then for the Adventure Series we're doing indigenous grapes.
I'm so excited about this
one. We're going to do a little tour of the world to find some wines that they grow where they grow.
The grapes only grow in that country.
I'm not going to say that because someone will tell me, well, there's one winery here that has that as well. But we're going for this kind of, lesser known, fun, interesting places for a little bit of a tour around the world.
So there will be no Cabernet Sauvignon, no Chardonnay.
Will there not? Caroline's right in the wine list. Cool, fantastic.
Okay, there might be. I don't know. Jamie hasn't told me what the wines are yet.
It's going to be magic. It's going to be magic. But no, thank you for joining us tonight. Once again, if you've liked it, get your...
go away, clever clogs.
Yeah. I've got no point. If you've enjoyed it, as I said, get your photos up with the hashtag Reach for Ribera de Duero. Tag us in it. Tag your friends in it. Let people know that you've had a lovely, lovely time. And yeah, we're going to be building what we're doing for the rest of the year. The world's opening up again. I'm an excited little person because I'm getting to go over to Italy in the next month or so. I'm going over to Austria. So fingers crossed we can get some really good content of actually being at the vineyard with the people and make it even more immersive for you guys.
Do I get to go anywhere?
Yeah, back to the producer desk.
No, I'm staying in Leighton Buzzard.
So I hope you've had a wonderful time, and fingers crossed we will see you again very, very soon. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Desposito, oye, ¿cómo va? Vino tinto, huevos tortillada. Yeah. Arrancha Sánchez Vicario, Crablo flamenco guitarro. Pimientos de patrón, una paloma blanca, jamón, jamón. Enrique y Julio Iglesias taught me all these Spanish phrases, and I just want to say muchas, muchas gracias.